We've got a very special episode of Unseen Libya with Jimmy and JoAnne Moriarty tonight. We are honored to be joined once again by retired Virginia State Senator Richard Black. Senator Black, Jimmy and JoAnne, welcome to the show.
Good evening. Thank you very much, Senator, for being with us.
Yeah, and I mean, this is a historic time for the country, Senator. You are a Vietnam veteran, you were a JAG officer in the Navy, you've just left service as a state senator in Virginia there, and we're going to be talking about this coronavirus. It's an unprecedented event, not just from the health standpoint, but the economic and political implications that everyone in the United States and elsewhere around the world is under right now. What can you say about it, Senator?
Well, the first thing I did when this thing broke was basically to just sit back and watch, because there has been a flu that was immensely deadly, and that was the Spanish flu of 1918. That flu killed 50 million people. Killed 675,000 in this country alone, and it was so bad that it reduced the average life expectancy of an American by 12 years.
Wow!
And it did this in 3 months. I mean, it was just astounding. So it was the equivalent today of having over 2 million people die. So nobody quite knows where the Spanish flu went or whether it will ever return. And so I'm always leery, I'm always cautious when these things first break, because I want to make sure it's not the Spanish flu. But I watched it and gradually began to, pull together the direction and so forth. This is no Spanish flu, first of all. And it's still somewhat unclear just what the mortality rate is for coronavirus. But we've had other viruses. This is like the third one that is a mutation from some sort of an animal virus. So we had the SARS virus, we had the MERS virus, and they all sort of just get, woven into the annual flu. But this one, it's significant, but at the same time, I think what we're doing to counteract it is causing tremendous damage.
Yeah.
And I think there's a wave of hysteria. If you go back to when this first broke early in the year, President Trump was he was calm about it. He recognized it, but he didn't overreact. And right away he came under attack. You're not panicky enough. You're not this and that. And consequently, he was forced to ratchet up, and then his opponents would ratchet up, and then he'd ratchet up. Well, now we've just blown the thing through the roof. Meanwhile, what's interesting is, we all know how the numbers accelerate and how they accelerate faster, but people don't tend to talk about the fact, what happens then? Well, what happens then is they stop accelerating at an accelerating rate. They begin to slow down, and eventually they begin to decline. And I was looking at some numbers because, things are unfolding very rapidly now within the last week or so. And so people looking at these curves are saying, okay, what's happened in this last week? It's interesting that in China, where the whole thing started, the numbers are quite small. The new cases, new deaths rather, the new deaths are kind of minuscule for their population. They run somewhere between 3 and 11 people dying per day This is in a country that's got, I don't know, what is it, 1 billion people or so. And so it's essentially a negligible figure, and it's rather flatlined. If you go to Korea, they're in the same boat. Korea, they had a surge, and then it's flatlined, and the numbers are rather small. Now here's one figure that is very interesting, because I think anybody who looks at this is very interested in Italy.
Right.
Italy right now, they have the greatest death rate from coronavirus of any country. And if you go back 2 days ago, they were running roughly 800 deaths per day. And so today, down from 800 a day to 600 a day over a span of 2 to 3 days. So I think what we're seeing is it looks like Italy potentially has hit a peak. Now, something could go haywire with that, but it's beginning to look like they may have peaked out. Spain is still going up, but I suspect if you look at it over the next week, you'll probably see Spain starting to begin to cap out and begin the decline. So anyway, where we are right now, I think there has been a hysterical overreaction. It's not that it's not a problem, but the great threat of coronavirus is to the world economy. This is the first, I don't know that they even did this during the Spanish flu, but they have basically turned the lights off and sent everybody home.
Everywhere.
Well, Senator, my opinion on that, of course, I've always got an opinion, but my opinion is that the crash was imminent. The bad guys saw it coming, and they really weaponized via economic crash. They trying to hide it and say that's not our fault. That was the virus did it. It's not the fact that we printed gazillions of dollars of phony money. That's not our fault. It was this virus. And the thing that was so evident to us is the real indices of the markets were showing an absolute disastrous spiral downwards into nothing months and months ago. And to prove the bad guys knew it, I sent you that article that was published in Newsweek about how the military had set this U.S. military had set in place their plan to protect the government in the event that something happened that the people lost trust or faith in the government. And so the fact that when this first started, immediately the market started to collapse, and that was because Putin said he wasn't going to reduce the oil supply, which in essence was the death knell for the for the petrodollar. And that's when you really started to see the markets crash. And on that weekend, before we ever got to the market opening Monday, the U.S. Stock market and all the indices and everything started going in the toilet. And the thing that was atypical about that is as you've got the soft goods and everything going down, normally you would see gold, silver, platinum going up in exactly the same proportion up. That didn't happen either. But you got to look at who controls the London Metal Exchange, et cetera. The same banksters that own the Federal Reserve and European Central Bank, et cetera. So they were trying to keep people out of the hard assets, keep them in dollars, keep trying to pump into it. And they pump trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars into their banks. Now, if we really had a legitimate government that was interested in trying to help the people in face of this terrible sickness, they would be informing the people, they'd be doing things to protect the people, and the government didn't do that. They first of all went to protect themselves.
Yeah.
Second to that, we had all the politicians in D.C. were selling their stocks and bonds days and some of them weeks before it happened. They were selling short. All the criminal politicians up there have done very, very well off this crash. But in the meantime, John Q. Public has not had the protection that's been afforded, and China stood up. They went to help their people first. And the other travesty that we're seeing is that the fact that the U.S. is sanctioning medicine to Venezuela and Iran in the face of this possibly terrible thing is unconscionable.
It really is. If Americans knew how cruel and how barbaric sanctions are, they would be appalled. I mean, we put sanctions on Yemen, and the purpose of those is we were helping the Saudi Arabians target water purification plants in order to spread the cholera epidemic, and then we sanction them so that they can't get medicines. Now, some people say, "Oh, well, you can get medicines in there." Well, the problem is that when you've devalued the currency, which we do through the SWIFT exchange, then you can't purchase anything. I ran into this in Syria when I was there in 2016, and they showed me what was going on. And they had a long list of people who required cancer medicines. And there's some excellent medicines for breast cancer now, and but they were not able to translate their currency into dollars to purchase the needed medicines. So people were dying of cancer because they couldn't get medications. And it's not just cancer, but all sorts of life-saving medications.
Yeah.
Now, what we do with sanctions is brutal. I mean, it is not terribly different than what we accuse people of doing with concentration camps. It is vicious. It is
crimes against humanity.
They really are. And it used to be illegal to blockade food and medicine from countries, but we've done a workaround, because what we do is we devalue the currency, and then we say, oh, well, you can bring in food and medicine, you just can't pay for it. Well,
they blockaded Libya openly. When we were in Tripoli in 2011, and because they were not getting control, they blockaded medicine, they blockaded food, they blockaded water, they blockaded gasoline. People
repair
had
parts for their water treatment plants and their power plants.
Yeah.
They blocked maintenance, and purely civilian activities were absolutely attacked. Economic warfare on the country, and the U.S. has done that in 70 countries, maybe 80. And it's a worse kind of a warfare because it affects the people. It doesn't attack the government.
People were waiting sometimes 4 days in line for gasoline in Tripoli. And so the tribes went to Algeria. We were with the people, we saw them leave on the bus. We knew them very well. They took their money in hand, went to Algeria, bought a tanker full of gasoline to bring into Tripoli for the people because NATO wouldn't let any gasoline come into Tripoli. They got it on the open seas, and NATO dropped these they were British soldiers on and pirated the ship and took it to the rebels over in Benghazi, to the rats.
Wow.
They stole the gasoline that the tribes had bought.
They're stealing all the Syrian oil and delivering it to the rebels.
This is open. They did it openly.
Piracy, where we just said,
yeah,
we want your money. We're going to take your oil in your sovereign country. We're just going to take it. I mean, I think it took the bipolar world with the Soviet Union versus the U.S. to really maintain international law. And once that dissolved, we were just the big bully on the schoolyard, and we could push around anybody we wanted, and we have done so. And it's kind of a shame. I mean, we had an opportunity to be the good guys, but we have not taken that opportunity.
We got the worst of the worst in charge. I don't understand that, but I do want to bring up Libya for a minute. There's no coronavirus in Libya at all, Senator. They're very proud of that. I'm proud of that. I think that's great. And there's an article, Jason, there's a map I sent you that it's the first link on there. It's a map, and it shows that the countries that have it, Africa actually has a very low rate of coronavirus. And you can see there, Libya is gray. It has no coronavirus in it.
You know, that brings up a good point, because I noticed this very early on. Africa, for all practical purposes, is free of coronavirus. There may be a couple of cases here and there, but it suggests to me that in tropical environments, because it was somewhat similar in South America, but as you know, South America has its cold parts and it has its warm parts. But it seems that where you have a tropical environment, you have low levels of coronavirus. And I think the hope is that as we work our way out of the flu season, which will come very soon, that as the weather becomes warmer in this country, the coronavirus will just dissipate. Now, I haven't.
It's temperature sensitive, and in 40-something countries, they're treating it with hair dryers. You know, blow them up the sinuses and everything, and get it up to 135 degrees, 2 minutes, and it's dead. So it's temperature sensitive. In the hospitals, the nurses and doctors are being told that if you maintain 27 to 28 degrees centigrade, that it kills it. So it is not
Doesn't like the
temperature
sun
resilient. It doesn't like the sun. So you're absolutely right. As things warm up, this virus dies off. And there are a lot of
France said about that.
Go ahead.
Back, oh my gosh, what would have been around 1970 or so. I was a Marine company commander and had an engineer company, and we were moving them down to Vieques Island, Puerto Rico. And I flew down there on a C-130 to do a liaison trip. And I had at the time a terrible cold, flu, whatever it was. It had been lingering and dragging on. And I can literally remember as the doors of that aircraft opened, I walked out and I took a deep breath of this warm, humid air, you know, fresh salt air. And I felt like top of the world. And that cold just was gone on the spot. I mean, I've never seen anything like it.
Couldn't survive.
Yeah.
Now,
And
Senator
I
Black,
think
have I
that was-
found, is this a picture of you or is this a different Lieutenant Richard Black?
That is somebody different. I don't know who that is.
Okay, so we won't show that. Well, one thing that I wanted to point out while we're discussing this is that, you know, this is the heat map, the real-time updated map provided by Johns Hopkins University. Ironically, you know, it's listed by, you know, the order of the most infections to the least, with China at the top, then Italy, US, Spain. Libya is not even on this list at all. And
Doesn't have any cases.
yes,
There's no cases in Libya.
I think that anyone who might be doubting what we say, Johns Hopkins agrees. Libya has no reported or recorded cases. Whoops, and that's quite strange. Senator Black, there's a number of things that we've been discussing on Crowdsource the Truth that have come up elsewhere in the world of alternative news that is not sponsored by major corporations and appearing on national networks, but independent news that, in the case of Crowdsource the Truth, is sponsored by the viewer. We've been talking about this scientist, a Chinese-Canadian researcher who was escorted out of the Level 4 microbiology lab in Winnipeg, Canada, by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police back in July. CBC reported this, and this scientist had traveled to Wuhan, China to train, I think, 4 or 5 researchers at the Wuhan lab. She traveled with samples of the coronavirus. We've seen a patent that's been issued by the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office to the Pirbright Foundation, a British Research Association that has a patent on a genetically attenuated version of the coronavirus. They're funded in part by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and people have been very fascinated by this Event 201, which took place in October, where they were basically wargaming a pandemic outbreak that is just remarkably similar to what's been going on with this COVID-19. There's been like nonstop press conferences, but we just haven't heard anything in the US media about this Chinese scientist. The Canadian Broadcasting Company followed up to this July article in October, right around the same time this Event 201 was happening. The follow-up told us that the RCMP investigation continues, but gave us no details about Dr. Jianggu Kui or why she was escorted out. It's unclear if she's been arrested or questioned or what, if anything, she has to do with this. The spread has been so strange in that there's this heavy concentration in Wuhan, China, but the next closest in size to outbreak in China is only 22 people dead. I mean, I'm not minimizing the death of 22 people, but when we're talking about a city in China that has 3,153 deaths, and then the next closest in China is 22, and then the next highest outbreak is all the way in Italy. This seems like a very strange, inorganic way for a virus to be spread around. Could this be a biological weapon, Senator, that someone, whether it's the Chinese government, the US government, or independent actors like some of these foundations and billionaires? We've got individuals in the United States right now and elsewhere around the world whose personal wealth exceeds the gross domestic product of most countries. Do we have some kind of James Bond villain type organization doing biological warfare against the world?
Well, I don't want to speculate too much. I will say it sort of got my attention that two of the countries that suffered initial outbreaks were China and Iran. That struck me as being unusual, and for people who are into these things, it is interesting that the Biological Warfare Center at the Army laboratories at Fort Meade, Maryland, closed down because there was inspection that said that they were unable to control the release of viruses, and I've verified that. Now that happened just before all of this outbreak occurred. I'm not saying that's where it came from. I'm not naive about things that the CIA does, and so I won't speculate that who might have done it, but it's not beyond the realm of imagination that some of these things might have come from outside of China and outside of Iran.
Let me throw one name out there of an article it was a publication put out by the Rockefeller Foundation in 2014, and it's titled "Scenarios for the Future Technological and International Development." And in this, they define exactly how a pandemic can be started and spread and everything. And the only way it won't work is if the governments aren't strong enough in controlling their people. And on page 18 of this 58-page document, they have a plan called Lockstep, where they have all the indoctrinated people fall in lockstep doing everything that the government is directing them to do. So they're defining exactly what's going on in this coronavirus scare and how they can exploit it. All the countries can take control, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a 2014 article from the Rockefeller Foundation. Rockefeller,
page
of course,
18, Jason.
Yeah,
page 18.
Rockefeller Foundation is one of the 7 banksters,
We can always trust the Rockefeller
Oh,
Foundation.
absolutely. Absolutely.
We would never do anything to hurt our country.
Yeah.
So, there are things out there, and it's amazing to me that the bad guys will absolutely blueprint their plans and they publish them. Here's what we're going to be doing. And it was real shocking when you read just page 18, that lockstep, and that details exactly what they're forcing all of us to do right now. And when you walk up to a bus stop and they put a thermometer up there, and if you've got a temperature, you can't ride the bus. Those kinds of control activities are in their game plan. So a colloquial science society of this type is not what we need.
Wow.
Well, one thing that is happening, if you go back to 9/11, which was in 2001, I remember George Bush saying, if we let them change our way of life, they will have won.
Yeah.
Well,
They
they
won.
in spades.
They absolutely won.
Today, can you imagine when you were growing up, if someone had told you that Americans going through a line to get on an airplane would have to take off their shoes and their belts and be x-rayed, and you'd have old ladies having to have x-rays of their bodies made and stuff like that. Why people would have rioted back in the day.
Yep.
Now people have gradually been trained to just accept whatever you're told to do. It doesn't matter how draconian it is. If government comes in and says shut down your restaurant, shut down
That's
your
crazy.
store.
Yeah. Really, they don't have the power to do it, but if people do it, then it's done.
When we gave up all our rights after 9/11, we freely gave up so many rights.
Yeah.
And that was a planned event, but when we gave up our rights and now then they're taking them from us and nobody is pushing back, there has to be some pushback.
And what
No,
would people have said, Senator? You've been to war, ostensibly fighting communism in Vietnam. That's what the government told you to do, and you did it. You did service to our nation to protect us from the spread of communism. Back in the day, in the 60s and the 70s, when the fear of communism was at its height, and the propaganda, the imagery of people waiting in line for meat and toilet paper in the Soviet Union. This is 23rd Street in Manhattan just the other day. People waiting in line outside Whole Foods, being restricted to how many can enter. I was just in there today. Thankfully, toilet paper is back on the shelves. They had about 4 packages of it, but it was very rainy, so there hadn't been too many people outside. It was cold. Today's a day that you might get sick, even if there was no coronavirus floating around. But I mean, what do you think about that? A line? I mean, and I literally was wondering, will they have toilet paper?
Well, yeah. One of the most deadly, damaging phrases in our lexicon is price gouging. Now, what is price gouging? Price gouging is when the price of an item reflects supply and demand. And any time that government moves in and suppresses the price, it distorts the whole mechanism. When I went down to Hurricane Andrew, long ago, but this was a horrific hurricane that hit Miami more than any hurricane before or since. And they did not have wage and price controls. What happened is people all over the country, they'd get a U-Haul it, they'd fill it up with generators and chainsaws and go down there to make their fortune. And the first week or so, guys did make their fortune. They'd sell things 3 and 4 times what they had bought them for. By the end of about 1 week, the market price in Miami of generators and chainsaws was lower than it was in Virginia or Washington State or somewhere else. And from there on, you could get those things more cheaply in the city of Miami, where there was tremendous demand, than you could anywhere in the country. Why? Because nobody suppressed the price. Now, you compare that to this thing. There was tremendous demand for Purell hand sanitizer and for these little masks. And so there were thousands of entrepreneurs who went out. There's a great article in the New York Times on this, by the way. And so they bought up all that they could from the dollar stores and the Walmarts, and they had this huge supply of this stuff, and they wanted to market it on Amazon and on eBay. And when they did, they were blocked because Amazon and eBay didn't want any price gouging. So they wouldn't let the price go up, which would have increased the supply, because people would, if they're making a huge profit, they want to produce. So instead, they just suppressed the price, and literally thousands of these entrepreneurs are stuck with garages full of Purell and all this stuff. And everybody else is saying, oh, we've got a shortage. Only the government can save us. The government has to produce this stuff. Well,
Yeah.
look, if you can't produce Purell, this little
You can make it at home.
yeah, you can make it
Yeah,
anywhere
it's just alcohol and aloe vera. Anybody can make it.
as long as the price is right. But if the price is not right, who wants to sell it? So you
Yeah.
let the price surge. That reduces hoarding when it surges, and it brings online a huge amount of new supply. And before you know it, in a matter of weeks, there would be so many face masks and so much Purell hand cleaner, people wouldn't know what to do with it.
But
Same thing
Senator,
with paper.
you're talking about capitalism. This sounds radical.
It has become radical. I think people increasingly are thinking that the way things are produced is the government orders something to be done, and they negotiate with a huge corporation. They issue a contract, and then it happens. The problem is that you're not talking about 10 products that we need. You're talking about billions of products, some of them very obscure that you'd never think about and never know existed. But through the price mechanism, they all find their way and they all get produced. But when you clamp down on it, who was it, Jimmy? Was it, I forget whether it was Nixon. Nixon imposed the price controls, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Yeah. You got the gold standard drawn too.
Did Jimmy Carter cap the gasoline prices? I can't remember.
No,
I can't remember.
I don't remember that either.
But
Okay.
I think, yeah.
But
All those backfired.
between the two of them, they distorted the markets. And I think it was Nixon who, drove up prices and got inflation going. Jimmy Carter was also into the price control deal. And when you cap prices, everything comes unglued. Capitalism cannot work if prices can't float freely. And so the best thing you can do, if you have a shortage, a dire shortage, let people know about it and let the price go as high as it wants. And it's like magic. It's that invisible hand of Adam Smith.
Supply and demand.
Know it before you know it. If the price goes up, the supply rises and the demand drops, and you meet equilibrium. It works. It's real stuff.
Yeah,
But we got away from it.
We've got a lot
Senator
of.
Black, we had a message sent to us from a friend today that said in France, they have put out a big warning about ibuprofen. They said anti-inflammatories enhance the disease of coronavirus. They had 3 young people who had been on ibuprofen and were all critical from the coronavirus, that there's something in the ibuprofen that enhances the coronavirus. So if you have a chance, don't take any kind of anti-inflammatory.
Pardon me.
I did hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
I
Yeah,
think it's accurate. So that's good advice to people who might be listening.
yeah.
Mhm.
But I have to say, that there's this idea that if we keep enough social distancing, if we shut down industries and companies, we don't have people gathering together, that not many people will be exposed to it. Well, we may reduce the exposure, but what does that mean for next year? Doesn't that mean that those people will be 100% vulnerable next year?
Sure,
Right.
sure. Well,
And-
we've had flus and colds and viruses forever, haven't we? I mean,
Yeah.
going on throughout centuries.
Mumps, measles were a neighborhood event when we were growing up. We
Yeah,
all lived through that. You know, if some kid got sick, the mothers brought all the kids in so they get it out of their system, get the immunity up when they were children. You know,
Yeah.
but the thing that we have to look at is this is being treated to benefit or to cover up the economic collapse. That's what we really get down to, and the people that are most affected are John Q. Public. And the government, in all its attempt to protect itself against the people, because what the government is doing is so heinous that when they're finally exposed for what they are, then they've got to have the military around to protect the government from us, because we finally seen the nasty event, and we have to point our finger someplace. So the bad guys have to have the military to protect them, the phony government, the phony traders, from us. And you know, they've printed so much money, nobody has any idea.
Yeah, but
there's
when
no count. Just a minute. And now their latest new event, they said, for the protection of everybody, don't handle money. We got to change everything to a sanitary, electronic money. So they want to get all the cash out of everybody's hands because it's nasty. You're going to get sick from touching that money. And if we've got this electronic money, then who's going to have control of all of it? Well, not going to be us. So the government, you know, this is another one of their steps.
Yeah,
all
but
the things
I
they're
get back
doing.
to Libya on that, because their money was it got real dirty sometimes, and they have not one case, so you can't blame it on
Yeah,
the
that's
money.
true.
You cannot blame it on the money. That
Yeah.
doesn't work. But
you know, one of the things that bugs me greatly is, you know, we will do anything for MBS, Mohammed
Bin Salman.
also known as Mr. Bonesaw, MBS.
yeah,
Mr.
yeah.
And this guy has, you know, he has committed crimes that are so outrageous. And, you know, he's got this continuing war crime against Yemen, the poor Houthi tribesmen that he bombs and sends mercenaries to go and kill them. And then that SOB, after all of this stuff, here we are, we've said, okay, we will join you in the war crime against Yemen. We will commit war crimes because we're your good allies and we'll help you out. And then the guy decides, well, I'm going to wreck your oil industry. I'm going to paralyze it. I'm going to destroy it. I'm going to drive you guys out of business. And so here he is. He's flooding the free world with oil. All that he can produce, he's got in the UAE.
He's got to have the money. He's got to have the
Yeah.
money.
Yeah, well,
He's overspent. You know, they don't have any sense about what they spend.
no, he has no sense about anything.
Yeah, I'm sure that's correct.
And I wish
know-
instead of headed towards a war with Iran, which we clearly are, you know, anytime the signal that you need to watch for is when we start referring to a government as a regime.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's one of the clearest signals that we are about to go to war. It may be a year off, maybe it's 3 years off. We're trying, you know, when we carried out the targeted killing of the general from Iran,
Soleimani.
Soleimani. The purpose of killing Soleimani is, I believe that the insiders, the deep state, believed that would trigger an inevitable war, because Soleimani was under diplomatic immunity. He was
Right.
on the way to a peace conference arranged by our friends, the Saudi Arabians, who suckered him into going. He should have never trusted the Saudis. That
Yeah,
was
but
terrible.
it was Trump too, Trump and his people.
Yes,
They did it.
I was very disappointed.
Yeah.
And Soleimani was a national hero, probably more so than anybody else. They had, the State Department has floated this business that, oh, he killed all these Americans. I don't think we have the slightest evidence to support that.
He
But
saved a lot of Americans, actually.
3 different times.
he was one of the 2 generals most responsible for the destruction of ISIS and Al Qaeda.
That's right.
So it was a tremendous setback in the war on terror when he was killed. But we did it, and I think we did it thinking this would be so outrageous that Iran would do something precipitous, and then we could use that as an excuse to go to war. That was Pompeo's thinking, the scarred bully. And it didn't work. Surprisingly, the Iranians were very measured in their
civilized. They were civilized about it. We need to look. Our government needs to look in the mirror. They'll see the regime.
But look at how the virus is attacking them. I think the weaponized version of the virus has been introduced into Iran.
Well, it's an interesting point, Jimmy.
That possibility.
Sorry, say again,
they
Senator?
They can drop it from the sky.
What did you say about that, Senator? You think it is a possibility?
Well, I don't discount the possibility because it's clear we're planning to have a great war with Iran, bigger than anything that we've ever seen in the Middle East. We've surrounded Iran with American bases and troops, and we're constantly giving them a poke in the eye, hoping something will elicit a reaction that we can go after.
Why? Why do we want to fight Iran?
Okay.
Let him answer.
Well, this goes back to shortly after 2001, when an order came down from the Secretary of Defense that we were going to take down 7 countries in 5 years. Never forget this. This is the foundation. And you had the Supreme Allied Commander Europe, and he was Wesley Clark. Wesley Clark is on excellent quality video, and he clearly explains what took place. And in the course of a couple of conversations, he was read a top secret document that said, we are going to take down 7 Middle Eastern countries in 5 years. Now, we haven't met the schedule, but we are marching right through them. Libya was one, Syria was one, Lebanon was one, Yemen, Iraq. Anyway, the last of the 7 was Iran, which is the biggest, the strongest, and potentially, if we do attack Iran, as is I have not the faintest doubt that we desire and intend to attack Iran. If we do it, it will risk the Third World War. It will risk a nuclear war. It will destabilize the entire world. And yet,
but Senator, let me posture something. The Third World War is the only way that the Khazarian mafia is going to be able to maintain financial control of the world, because their petrodollar is dead and dying, and everybody's running away from the guerrilla because they can now. But World War II, we had not recovered from the Big Depression going into World War II.
Yeah.
And Roosevelt absolutely bought us into that war. People here did not want to be a part of it. but that broke the collapse of the United States, and our economy began to grow. And it can't be a short war. It's got to be a long war. It's got to be at least 6 years where you can gear up all the manufacturing and everybody can have a job
You're
and
not
the prosper.
touting that. Sounds like you're touting it.
So the fact that they have not been able to start a war with Russia, they haven't been able to get Syria up to World War status. Iran is their hope, and I really think that this is their last ditch effort to get a world war started in order for them to maintain control financially. And with this collapse of the dollar that's happening right now as we speak, I think it's going to be more evident how much of a push the bad guys are going to put on trying to start that war with Iran and include Russia and China in it.
But you know, Russia, Putin came out and said, we don't want to fight anybody. However, we are going to make it so no one wants to fight us.
Yeah.
And that's a big point in his favor, because he's going to defend himself, is what he's saying, and he's going to help the people that he's allied with. You know, Russia sent a whole bunch of aid into Italy to help them yesterday and today, and also into Iran.
And into Spain.
Yeah. And into Spain, yes.
Well, and you know, some people would portray that as though somehow Russia is moving to take over the world. Well, they're not moving to take over the world. If people understood, Russia has a population about half of ours. They have a demographic problem, an aging problem. It's getting a little better, but not dramatically. They have a population, they have an economy about the size of Italy's. So they're not attacking anybody. I ran across figures on the number of military tanks that are operational in Germany, and it was stunning. The Germans, who have the greatest interest in whether Russia is a threat, have 200 tanks, almost nothing. They have almost no armor defending their border with Russia.
They put their hand out to Russia.
Why do they not have more tanks? Because they know with certainty that Russia is not a military threat.
Oh, but it is. Oh, but it is. Russia has huge military. Russia has the best weapons, best anti-missile weapons in the world. They have the best, there's a whole bunch of stuff Russia has. We've seen that, Jason, you know, about Russia.
You mentioned Germany. They've done a joint venture. They're using Russian technology and building some armored personnel carriers at a factory in Germany that is going to be sold then throughout the European community. So, you know, Russia they've been spending smart money on their military hardware where we've been spending stupid money.
Well, let me back up just a second, because I don't think you mean to say that Russia is a threat. Russia is a great military power.
Yes.
That's different than saying they're a threat.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, no, they aren't a threat.
That's true.
They don't want to attack anybody, I don't think.
Yeah.
No, they have no interest in it.
No.
Imagine for a moment that there's no defense of Europe and the Russians could just walk in and do whatever they wanted. What are they going to do? They don't have enough people to.
And who wants the problem? It's a huge problem if you go into Europe, you know. I heard that Germany reached out to Russia. They don't want to join the United States in a fight against Russia. Russia's supplying a lot of gas to Europe and doing a lot of things that Europe needs, you know, and they don't want to fight with them.
Russia's building defensive military hardware. That's what they're doing.
They are. And you know, a lot of it would be secret, except that we have become so threatening and aggressive towards Russia that they have disclosed some of their advanced weapons, like the hypersonic missiles, just to let us know, hey, in case you're overly tempted to use these low-grade tactical nuclear weapons against us, we can retaliate. And I think that's the reason. Just saying, don't invade our country.
Yeah.
Well, Russia's done a good job of keeping the virus out of Russia. and I think that they're really treating their people as intellectual beings, educating them, telling them what you should be doing and shouldn't be doing. And the fact that Wuhan has been real important in this whole process, this whole scenario. And my opinion is that the weaponized version of this virus also was deployed in Wuhan, and because we've got this disassociation of the number of victims and the deadly attacks and things this virus has done in locales, not all over. And we're not seeing it. Jason, Senator Black, he goes out on the streets in New York every day without a mask, and he goes out every day and does a street walk.
He films around in New York,
and he's seen stacks and stacks of emergency vehicles just parked, and the drivers are smoking cigarettes, and they're not carrying any sick people.
There
Jason,
he is.
Every day he's doing this.
He films it every day.
I mean, if I don't have coronavirus by next week, then it's certainly not as contagious as they're telling us. I obviously don't want coronavirus, but as Jimmy and JoAnne are saying, I went to the parking facility where the fire department keeps its ambulances today. The street was filled with ambulances on Saturday, and I spoke to a postal worker who was delivering mail right over there who goes by every day. He said this is actually many more ambulances than are usually there, and I don't think that means that the FDNY purchased new ambulances and put them there. I think because everybody is home in their apartments, not walking around on the street calling ambulances, the ambulances are just hanging out. And when I spoke to the EMTs, the guy stopped and spoke to me. He had a sandwich wrapped in tin foil. I couldn't imagine that someone under the pressure of an unprecedented global pandemic that was gripping the city with 1 death per hour, how does this ambulance driver have time to sit and chat with me rather than just running inside and ignoring what I'm saying? We've seen this all over the city. I've seen ambulances stopped at red lights. There's nobody driving around. You could be in a regular car. You wouldn't need to stop at a red light. If you were in an ambulance going to get someone with coronavirus or trying to bring someone with coronavirus to the hospital, wouldn't you put on the lights and go right through the traffic light? There's so many incongruent things that I'm seeing, Senator Black, that it causes me to believe that this is a cover operation of some kind.
Manufactured. Yeah.
Manufactured
well, it's
thing.
very strange. Along those lines, had a dear friend who was at Inova Hospital, Fairfax, big hospital here, and she went to the emergency room, and for the first time in her lifetime, there was not one person in the emergency room.
Yeah, that's it.
I
It's
went
true.
in because I had a little accident while I was doing some exercise and stuff. I went into the urgent care. And lo and behold, I thought they would be flooded with all of these virus people. While I was there for about an hour and a half, 3 people, including myself, it was empty.
Yeah.
So something is not quite right in the way that they're reporting all of this stuff.
That's right. That's
exactly.
right.
I had an
agree.
appointment to have some testing done in Beaumont, the biggest hospital complex there, Christus.
Mhm.
And so we go in, and there's 4 armed police
At the door.
at the door. JoAnne has to give up her license to let her in because she's not the patient. And there's a check-in area, really nice, friendly people, always 6 or 8 people that check in. And you go there, they take your name, then you sit down, and then you're called into another desk where they check your insurance, and then you go to another cubicle where they check in. That process has always taken us how long?
Half an hour.
Half an hour to 45 minutes.
Mhm.
We walk in the door, there's one person at check-in. I go there, this gal looks at, we go down to the cubicle. I'm through there in 3 minutes.
Then there's nobody.
Nobody in the
It's
hospital.
completely empty. We went down to X-ray. You had to have an X-ray. Nobody on the elevator. One person on the elevator. We go down. There's nobody where we're at. Nobody. There's one lady. She says, "Come back here. This is where you need to be."
Biggest hospital
us 2
complex in
minutes.
Beaumont, Texas.
2 minutes, and they kept saying, "Code red, code red." And I looked at the guy next to me. I said, "What is that?" And he said, "Oh, somebody tried to go out the back door."
No, code
Can't
red
go out
is
the
when
back
they
door.
code red is when they fill a pillowcase with soap and beat the crap out of you, isn't it, Senator?
That's it. That's it.
Probably all the patients had probably run off to buy toilet paper
I
at Big
know.
That's it. That's
Now
it.
let me
That's
ask the
right.
panel this, because I'm very interested in knowing what the senator says. First of all, we've had a lot of people in the comments who were remembering these gas lines of 1970 when you guys were talking about the impact that the government has tried to have on capitalism at various times. And we do have a number of viewers in the comments who have been sponsoring generously through Super Chat on Crowdsource the Truth too. I do want to remind everyone who's watching that today's episode is a very special episode of Unseen Libya with Jimmy and JoAnne Moriarty, which is normally a sponsor-exclusive show that sponsors of Crowdsource the Truth or Jimmy and JoAnne can see on patreon.com/James and JoAnne Moriarty or patreon.com/Crowdsource the Truth. For people who haven't seen Jimmy and JoAnne before, it's so important that they have your sponsorship. Jimmy and JoAnne started an oil services business, and they were actually in Libya doing business quite productively for many years, from 2007 until the U.S. led NATO-backed invasion and destruction of Libya, which decimated their business, destroyed their sizable personal finances, and basically left them destitute. So I hope that people who are watching today will become sponsors of Jimmy and JoAnne, and will start to visit LibyanWarTheTruth.com for updates about the real.
We were there, and we were there in 2011 from May until September, and we are eyewitnesses to the war crimes against the Libyan people. We have all the proof. We've had the CIA.
We were captured by Al Qaeda,
we were
taken to
captured.
their torture
That's
center.
right.
We were to be killed, chopped up, and burned. We're the only people who've gotten out of Al Qaeda's hands alive.
It was NATO's Al Qaeda.
Yeah. And that was with the grace of God, literally. So, you know, our story is pretty telling. It was
Senator
real
Black knows
dramatic.
us real well, yeah.
Senator Black knows us real well. He actually started investigating what was going on in Libya first, and then he transitioned into Syria. Senator Black's been in Syria a couple of times. He knows more about what really has been going on in that part of the world than anybody.
Yeah.
Well, let me just comment on this too. I follow Middle Eastern intelligence, military matters, and so forth, and I've done it intensively since 2011. And the finest intelligence, the finest information that you can possibly get on Libya is from Jimmy and JoAnne's channel here. They know just up to the minute exactly what's happening, who the players are, where the tactical movements are taking place. And when I want to prepare for something that I'm doing, I always go onto your channel, Jimmy, JoAnne, and that's where I get the information, because it's top notch.
Thank you so
Senator.
much, Senator.
Thank
And
you.
the other thing
Libyans
I want to
appreciate you so much.
Sorry, JoAnne. The other thing I want our viewers to know is that they can purchase the DVD Escape from Al Qaeda. This tells Jimmy and JoAnne's amazing but true story of how they literally escaped from the clutches of Al Qaeda. I don't want to give it away, but Jimmy had some cash on him, and it worked out pretty well. But the DVD is $15. It costs $5 to ship it domestically. And if you sponsor Jimmy and JoAnne on patreon.com/James and JoAnne Moriarty, in addition to being able to watch a huge library of interviews, including our past interviews with the senator, you're going to get $5 off. You get free shipping on the DVD. It's a great thing to order now. The post office is still working, and everybody's got all this time on their hands. In our last few minutes, I want to ask you all, what do we make of this dramatic shift in President Trump's stance? Senator Black, at the top of the conversation, you mentioned that initially he was telling everyone, look, this is a seasonal viral outbreak, people will get sick and there will be fatalities, but it's not something for the general public to worry about. Many medical professionals, including MDs, have told me that there is a school of thought and a very strong argument to be made that healthy people who have normal immune systems, those who are under 70 or even 65, if we want to be really conservative, people who haven't had organ transplants, people who aren't undergoing cancer treatment, should go out and go about their daily lives, build up this natural herd immunity so that next season will be protected. A lot of people say that would have been a more medically prudent approach, but we've also got President Trump coming out with a tweet over the weekend where in all caps, he says we cannot let the cure be worse than the problem itself. At the end of the 15-day period, we will make a decision as to which way we want to go. And now today, we see he's clashing with Dr. Fauci, who doesn't impress me. And it seems that the president wants to get the country back in business. Do you think there's any chance that at the end of 15 days, this will all go away? Mike Pence mentioned twice in a press conference on Saturday that we were 6 days into a 15-day containment period. What do we think about this?
Well, I believe that that President Trump wants to go back to business as usual. I think he understands that, when you shut off cash flow in an economy, it's not to where you can just say, "Oh, let's just watch it a while and see." That's like saying, "Well, we're going to cut off the blood flow to your brain. You'll be okay. Just you don't have to run around a while, but we're going to cut off your." Well, no, you die. And an economy that is cut off from cash flow dies. These people who are employed, they're not just meandering around, they're doing things, they're creating services, they're creating products. And when you shut them down, you kill the economy. And now you might think that having 545 people die from coronavirus is a big deal. It's rather trivial compared to ordinary flu, which is up to 22,000 killed by now. But here's the thing. At some point, if this economy is forced to unravel because people can't come together, they can't shop, they can't do all these things, at some point, there's going to be an explosion within the cities. And typically, you're going to see violence. If people cannot get what they need, if people cannot employ themselves, at a certain point, this whole culture is going to come unglued. And if you think a few people passing away from coronavirus is bad, you wait until we're back in the like the 1968 time when we had cities burning across this country. And that will happen at some point when the whole economy starts to implode. What we're doing with the economy is extraordinarily dangerous. It is reckless, and it's very foolish. And I think Trump, at a certain level, he understands that. He doesn't always surround himself with like-minded people. That's one of his weaknesses. But he does know that the economy is going to come unglued. And right now we're like an old World War I biplane, and we've got it in a full dive, and the whole thing is shuddering and shaking, and pieces are starting to come off. At a certain point, the wings explode and everything just falls apart. That's the economy for you. And we've got to stop it. We got to pull out of this dive that we're in.
Yeah.
Very agree. 100%.
Well, along the lines of what you're saying, Senator, this video I'm showing now was taken just yesterday. I don't know if you see this rather thuggish looking individual on the escalator behind me, but I didn't notice this guy until about 10 seconds from now, when he ran up behind me. As you'll observe, he's quickening his pace to smack me and attempt to steal the cell phone that I was recording Charles and myself with. And he got very aggressive. We were lucky in that a police officer, the only police officer I've seen in this train station in days, came up just the moment that this guy was, insisting on continuing to encroach on our position. But he seemed quite determined to do us harm. And I can tell you that it was a very hostile environment in Penn Station yesterday. Homeless people smearing feces on the floor. It would seem to me that if we have a dangerous viral pandemic, you'd want to have a plan in place to control the obviously large homeless community in a city like New York. These are people who are living in squalor, dirty conditions, spreading, potentially virus around the city. Instead, it seems that Mayor de Blasio just told the NYPD not to come to work, left the train station open. I would almost say, Senator, it seems like they're trying to create a recipe for disaster.
Chaos.
This is going on. I just mentioned George Soros during the last Virginia elections. He put a lot of money into the legal system so that the prosecutors, he bought off the prosecutors. I don't mean he bribed them. I mean, he put them in office. And so he put these extraordinarily radical liberal people in place, and they are now beginning to say, look, we're not going to prosecute these low-level crimes.
Right.
So what's happening in some parts of the country is that they say, well, we're not going to prosecute ordinary larceny, petty larceny up to $1,000. So you have these mobs of real tough minority kids, and they go into stores where some poor store owner just looks, he doesn't want to get killed, and he knows they're going to kill him if he raises a ruckus. So they just walk in and basically they shop, and each one of them takes almost $1,000 worth of stuff, and then they glare at the guy as they walk out the door. The guy could lose $10,000 in a morning, and no one will prosecute. None of these liberal Soros employed prosecutors will go after them. I believe George Soros wants to create chaos, cultural chaos and disintegration within our cities. He financed the election of the district attorney up in Philadelphia, and immediately crime soared.
San Francisco as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Stop prosecuting the lower level offenses, and then
they've opened up prisons. They've turned the prisoners out.
yes.
Some sheriffs and police, they say, we're not going to arrest anybody for drug deals or for housebreaking or anything like that during this period. Well, you better have a pistol in your house to protect yourself, because the police are not going to do it.
Well, gun sales have gone up 300% just recently, according to FBI statistics, because people get scared, and
Don't
they know.
blame them. Can't blame them.
Jason went to try to get a gun in New York, and he went to the Beretta store, and all he could get was a leather jacket.
Oh, it was closed that day. But you know what, Jimmy? I don't know if I told you this, but I did download and fill out the NYPD application for a handgun permit. And contrary to what I've been led to believe, there are circumstances under which you can carry a handgun in New York City. We'll see if my application allows me to do that. But anybody who's watching who has the good idea of coming to my apartment on a live stream and showing everybody where I live, if somebody shows up and tries to threaten me, depending on how quickly the police turn this around, they might get shot.
Yeah, you have to defend yourself. You have that right.
Yeah.
I want to get back
yourself.
to this George Soros thing, because I think this is a serious problem, and I appreciate you bringing it up, Senator. In addition to Philadelphia, which I had only recently heard about, I think The Boy 26 is a viewer of ours in Philadelphia who told me about that. Larry Nichols told me that Chesa Boudin, the guy who won and is now the district attorney of San Francisco, his campaign was at least in part financed by George Soros. He was raised by Bernardine Dorn and Bill Ayers, who you will remember were radical protesters of the Vietnam War, which we can have certainly an intellectual debate about the demerits of the Vietnam War, but the way that they protested and disrespected you and your fellow service members who were following orders and doing the right thing as best as you could was totally disrespectful, and they're murderers. They bombed civilian sites, injured and killed police and civilians, and this guy was literally raised by them because his father, who was also a member of the Weather Underground, was in jail for murder. Now this guy is...
They're terrorists, is what
they're
they
terrorists.
Well, they
And
were
he is now...
notorious in their day. There's no doubt. Everybody knew their name. The Weather Underground, they were
Yep, that's right.
known for being terrorists.
But isn't that what
Yeah.
we're seeing now, Senator? Isn't this the Weather Underground's plan coming to fruition? You know, Bill Ayers was also a mentor to Barack
Yes.
Obama. Barack Obama's
Yes.
first campaign event when he was running for senator was at Bill Ayers' father's house.
Yeah.
Yes. Well,
Obama's a weatherman.
you know, we're big on talking about the Russian oligarchs. The United States is ruled by oligarchs that can buy and sell Russian oligarchs a dime a dozen. I mean, these are huge oligarchs who control massive blocks of the American economy. They have become kind of a law unto themselves, and they make their rules. You know, when Bloomberg was running for president, he was the 9th wealthiest man on the earth. And one of his opponents said, look, he said, you've got more wealth than the bottom third of the entire US population.
Wow.
Now, you know, I'm all for free enterprise, but there's a point at which something is wrong when you have one man who owns as much as 100 million Americans and their families. That isn't right.
No.
And they're all interlinked. You know, there are a couple of them that sort of are real soft, mushy, liberal Republicans. Most all of them are Democrats. They're insider Democrats. And I do not believe that they have the interests of the United States at heart. They are globalists. They see themselves as citizens of the world, not citizens of this country. They have no regard for native-born Americans. To them, if you bring somebody from Eritrea or from Azerbaijan or wherever, they're interchangeable. There's no difference. But what makes America, America is the people. It's not the dirt. It's not the oceans. Lots of great countries have oceans and mountains and all of these other things. It is the people of America that make America great. And when you ethnically cleanse them and you do away with those people who built this country into a great nation, then gradually you erode it. And this is what they intend to do. They intend to gradually just diminish the makeup of the population. And I think their objective is to cause this country to come unglued.
Yes.
Yeah, it
Yes.
is.
This is
Because
basically...
it's the only country in the world that still has the citizens armed.
Yeah.
Right. Well, it's not just that. It's that they want to destroy the United States and then rebuild it in the image of what they want it to be, with all of them in charge. The other thing I wanted to ask you about President Trump's remarkable about face is that, you know, he went from saying coronavirus is, you know, I don't know if he said it was a hoax, but he said that the news about it is a hoax and it's not a big deal. And then he did an about face to saying we're at war with coronavirus. Perhaps the most shocking thing in this about face was that when he was asked about these senators who have engaged in what quite clearly seems like insider trading, dumping millions of dollars worth of stock on the knowledge they had from a secret briefing on coronavirus, when Trump was asked about this, he said he thought they were honorable people and shut down immediately even a question about the possibility
Yeah.
of investigation.
Yeah.
What did you think of that, Senator Black?
Well, I'm keenly aware of what his position started off to be. And I know how politics works. And when the media is creating an atmosphere of hysteria, if you seem like someone who doesn't get it, you're gone. And, you know, Trump is far from perfect, but he is the best that we've got. And
Biden is a scary thought.
well, you know, here, if you look at it, the Democrats are faced with electing, swearing into office the first president who assumed office in a state of dementia.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
you know, and not to overstate it, and I certainly feel for people who have early onset dementia, but his has progressed a little before early onset. And and that's my opinion. I'm not a doctor rendering a medical opinion, but just watching, you know, anybody can stumble. I don't make a big thing of the guys who say, well, I'm glad to be here with you in Wisconsin, and he's just flown out of Michigan, and, you know, and he mixes up what state he's in. But some of the things he's done have been truly bizarre.
Terrible. But his running mate, his vice president, is going to be Hillary. And so they'll declare him incompetent about 2 weeks after he's been installed, and then that make her president. It's a wonderful scheme they've got.
I would think he's got some people around him who know that if Hillary is the vice president, then he might as well never be sworn in, because
That's right. That's right.
going to be gone. He may be 6 feet under.
That's right.
If
Arkansas.
it repeats itself. So,
That's right.
Well,
you
Senator-
know, Obama was smart enough to avoid that. He made her Secretary of State.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Space.
That's
They
right.
wanted to be his vice president. He said, nah, I
Jason-
want a little longer than that.
Yeah. Before we go, I just want to say I'm going to post these statements I have. There was a Japanese doctor who made it, and also a hospital board that posted in their hospital. A nurse posted it. Real nice things to look for if you have a runny nose. These things about the coronavirus, and then the Japanese doctor talks about how the virus doesn't like heat, and it lives only 10 minutes in your mouth, and if you sip water, it will flush it down in your stomach. Your stomach will kill it. It's a nice thing. I'm going to post it.
Real positive things for everybody to understand and do.
I'll post it on Patreon, and I'll also post it on. You can post it on YouTube.
Sure, because we don't want anybody to get sick. We're not trying to say that people ought to just go out and do the most risky thing they can. But I think what we're saying is take it easy, relax, and get back to work. We must get back to work, or we're coming unglued.
Yeah.
Yes, 100%. We agree.
So hopefully
God bless you, Senator. Thank you so much. You're always shining light for all
you're
of
the
us.
You're the voice of reason, and we really need that in a time right now like that.
Well,
Absolutely.
I appreciate it, Jason. I appreciate being on your channel, and again, with what you're doing in Libya, keep up the good work. I hope that we're quickly approaching the tipping point where this UN puppet government, unelected puppet government, gets body slammed, and all of those terrorists that Turkey is moving into Libya. It is my sincere hope that they are buried in Libya and never return to Syria or even back to Turkey.
A lot of Turkish soldiers have been killed in Libya recently, and the Libyan National Army has requested Turkey to come pick them up.
Pick up the bodies.
Come pick up your dead soldiers.
Wow.
Oh yeah.
Wow. I don't mean to laugh at people dying, but
standing together and hoping for an election, as you know, Senator Black.
yeah.
Okay.
And we hope that the Libyan people can take their country back. I want to remind everybody who's watching us now, we've got over 500 live viewers. Every week on Monday nights, Jimmy and JoAnne join me for Unseen Libya on patreon.com/James and JoAnne Moriarty, patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. It's so important that our viewers become sponsors, particularly for the co-hosts. Jimmy and JoAnne have sacrificed so much to bring us this information, and frankly, we're lucky that they made it out of Libya alive. So if you're watching now and you've never seen them before, if you enjoyed this show and you're interested in learning more about the truth about the Libyan war, you should go to LibyanWarTheTruth.com, sponsor Jimmy and JoAnne on Patreon, purchase the DVD. You can learn quite a lot during this downtime, and I share the senator's sentiments in that hopefully the nation will come back online as soon as possible. Next week is what I'm hoping for, or even sooner. I don't know if that's possible. I really do appreciate you taking the time out of your quarantine day, Senator, and Jimmy and JoAnne. It's always a pleasure to be with you on the show. Thank you all so much for joining us. And thanks to everyone who's been watching and all of the generous sponsors who make Crowdsource the Truth and Unseen Libya possible. Look forward to having you all back on very soon. Have a great night and stay safe.
God bless you. Thank you so much. God bless you, Senator.
Thank you. Goodbye to everyone. Jimmy, JoAnne, Jason.
Bye, Senator.
Good
Thanks
night.
for watching, everyone.
Good night.
Have a great night.